Evangelical Alliance and Faith for Our Planet. And I hand over to Shiraz. Over to you.
Thank you. Is there a mic?
You should have, there should be a mobile mic. There you go, wireless. Thank you.
It's right here. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for all being here for the Faith for Our Planet COP28 event on religious philanthropy, a catalyst for climate financing. I'm honored, actually, to be joined by a very distinguished group of speakers today. And before we begin proceedings, I'd like to take a few moments to introduce Faith for Our Planet, explain a little bit about who we are, what we do, and how we came about. Faith for Our Planet was born out of a simple realization. When it comes to combating climate change, the global community possesses the financial resources needed. And in large part, it also possesses the technological innovation that is required. What is missing is willpower, moral leadership. Put another way, we lack an authentic culture of environmental preservation. And considering 84% of the world identify with a faith, faith communities and faith leadership are not merely peripheral to that exercise of building a culture of environmental preservation, they're central to it. For this particular event, FFOP has a campaign focused on the power of religious philanthropy and climate financing. This was really the brainchild of FFOP's chairman, Dr. Muhammad Abdul Karim Al-Isa, who is also the Secretary General of the world's largest Islamic NGO, the Muslim World League. Unfortunately, he could not be here with us today. But the spirit of this conversation, of this campaign, is really to focus on how faith, how religious communities and religious leadership can do more than merely express sentiments of support. We believe that religious institutions can make a direct, tangible impact in the climate effort. And leveraging the tremendous power of religious philanthropy for climate financing is one such way. Before I introduce all of the guests, I'd like to first introduce our keynote speaker, who we are very honored to have, the Minister for Environment, Natural Resources and Climate Change of Malaysia, His Excellency, Mr. Nick Nazmi. Thank you, Nick.
Very good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to begin and to follow up on what was mentioned just now with a quote that I think a lot of us are familiar with, coming from Gus Speth, the founder and the former president of the World Resources Institute, in which he said, and I quote, "I used to think that the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystems collapse, and climate change. I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could address those problems, but I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with those, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation, and we, lawyers and scientists, don't know how to do that." So it's an honor and privilege to welcome all of you to this event. Religious philanthropy remains a little understood and little explored channel to tackle the growing climate crisis. In Malaysia, we are under no illusions about the climate emergency affecting us all. We are a country of over 800 islands. We have a quarter of the world's species in our jungles and forests. We are also part of the coral triangle where most of the marine life is. With that in mind, we are deeply committed to the cause of environmental sustainability for our future and the future of our planet. And as we gather here at COP28, we are reminded of the shared responsibility we bear for the health of our planet and the well-being of future generations. Our forests, oceans, and biodiversity are under threat, and the time to act is now. The urgency of the situation demands collective and decisive action, but it also demands creativity and a real sense of community. Our commitment to environmental sustainability is deeply rooted in our cultural and natural heritage. Malaysia recognizes the interconnections of all life on earth, and like all the world's major religions, cherishes that life. And Malaysia also happens to be one of the most diverse countries, not only in terms of biodiversity, but in terms of its populations as well, where most of the major religions are present in Malaysia. And it is here where we should individually and collectively explore the potential in enlisting faith-based organizations in our approaches to address the climate emergency. For example, in the context of Islam and Malaysia, we are aware how faith-based philanthropy could play a transformative role in bridging the global climate financing gap by directing funds towards both existing initiatives and new environmental sustainability projects. We are trying to push the boundaries. Malaysia was one of the early centers of modern Islamic finance, but the focus has always been on the very narrow definitions of the Sharia. But we are pushing that it should also embrace SDG investments in line with the higher objectives of the Maqasid Sharia. And also, we are telling the Islamic finance sector, for example, that ethical financing, although today is seen from a purely secular perspective, has its roots in the Quaker and Methodist movements about 100 to 200 years ago. The collaborative approach is now becoming more common in Malaysia. We have things like green bonds, sustainable and responsible investments, as well as various sukuks or Islamic bonds that are focused on biodiversity, educational projects, so on and so forth. And this approach is seeking to create partnerships between government, non-profits and corporations, and we want to extend these partnerships and make new ones in this new world of climate financing. Part of this means recognizing that existing contributions made by faith-based groups to good causes around the world and helping direct those resources to climate projects. A collaboration between my ministry, the Natural Resources, Environment and Climate Change Ministry, and the Waqaf Foundation of Malaysia was established exactly 3 years ago, and it is an initiative to fund off-grid water supply projects for those who live in rural areas. Malaysia, we've successfully supplied 97% of our population with clean water supply, but there's still a gap of 3%, particularly in Borneo and parts of the peninsula. And we've spent almost 4 million ringgit for 82 projects all around Malaysia. Funds gathered through traditional religious giving to support climate-related initiatives could make a huge contribution to the overall fight against climate change. The presence of established multi-sector partnerships and initiatives like the Social Outcome Fund and the Social Impact Exchange in Malaysia could be instrumental in channeling religious philanthropy towards projects that mitigate climate change. Every nation must be honest with themselves too. We all have a financing gap when it comes to climate, and we have so many other problems with wars and economic instability around the world. But the answer is not to lower the bar, but to keep it high and reach it through effective planning and collaboration. We must remember that the poorest people who are most affected by climate change, and it is often the case that faith-based groups step in on their own around the world when these peoples are in dire need. These organizations often operate internationally, have access to the most intimate local knowledge sets, histories and practices of the communities that they operate in, have the ability to mobilize significant funding almost immediately and with huge impact, and have the trust of the respective communities to support and deliver projects. In many ways, they do things any good government should do. By opening the door and building partnerships with faith-based groups, we can achieve several things together. We have mutual interests, and why should we not work together to realize them? We can coordinate our efforts better and more effectively to respond to climate emergencies, and we can utilize religious-based networks and build relationships with communities in ways a government or a corporation cannot do. We can invest more readily in new technologies to help ease the transition away from fossil fuels towards renewables at a faster rate. We can create new bonds of kinship and understanding between all the world's major religions at a crucial time in history where countries are more tempted to retreat into themselves and drift further away from each other rather than work together. This is because working with faith-based groups does more than unlock their significant resources. It creates vital connections that we need in order to survive and prosper as human beings in a way that transcends borders. So as we deliberate on the challenges before us and get creative about solutions, let us remember that the decisions made at the summit will shape the destiny of the planet. This will take a lot of hard work and new ways of thinking, which is exciting as much as it is challenging. We stand ready to collaborate with the global community in the spirit of shared responsibility, brotherhood, and solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for some really timely remarks. I will now welcome onto the stage the Minister for Environment and Tourism of Botswana. Please. Thank you. There's a lot to get through. We don't have a lot of time. So I'm going to work my way down. And I think we'll begin first with Dr. Fakhruddin. And, well, before I do that, I should give a brief introduction to everyone that's here. So we have Dr. Fakhruddin Mangujaya, Chairman of the Center for Islamic Studies in Indonesia, is a drafting member for the Islamic Declaration for Global Climate Change and a scholar member of the Al-Mizan Covenant. We've just heard from His Excellency Mr. Nick Nazmi. We also have Her Excellency Filda Nani Karing, the Minister of Environment, Natural Resources, Conservation and Tourism of Botswana. We have, besides her, Chief Dr. Doliwalu Zakaria, Head of the African Union Interfaith Committee. We have further down Maha Qasim, CEO of 0 Point Partners and author of numerous publications on climate finance, and has co-authored papers for the Asian Development Bank Institute. And finally, at the very end, we have Dr. Chris Elesara, co-director of the World Evangelical Alliance Sustainability Center, and the World Evangelical Alliance represents over 600 million evangelicals globally. So thank you for all being here. Dr. Fakhruddin, I'd like to start with zakat. So the Islamic religious charitable tax, zakat, is estimated to raise anything up to $1 trillion per annum. And at a very conceptual level, it seems like there's tremendous potential there in leveraging a source of religious philanthropy for the purpose of climate efforts. Can you speak a little to the challenges and the opportunities that lie with the institution of zakat when it comes to using it for climate efforts and climate financing?
Thank you, Sharad. Being honest, I should learn this zakat implementation in this from my country, which is a main zakat is become as a secular country. Zakat in Islamic majority Muslim in Indonesia is like a voluntary. However, for the pious Muslim, they should pay zakat, 2.5% of their income, any income. They are variable of the Islamic finance other than zakat. We have waqf. We have other Islamic finance system, sukuk and Qiraat, and I think it is implemented in the Muslim system in other countries. However, in Indonesia, when we pay our zakat or infak, it's likely we paying double. So my American friend said, "You're paying tax as well as paying zakat. So what generous are you?" So that's what we're doing in the Islamic and secular situation. There's someone of piety. They want to purify what they have in their income. There is tax. There also zakat, 2.5%. That is why in lesson from Indonesia, we have 39,000 Islamic boarding school out of public state intervention. They established organically from the community. Where is the funding coming from? They're coming from zakat. They're coming from the ummah, from the Islamic community. So, yes, there are state intervention for the system and everything, for the system, but voluntary zakat is also for the, not only for education, they are for hospital, for mosque, they have wakaf. Wakaf potential is $12 billion per year. We have now generous another wakaf model, which is growing in Aceh about wakaf for forest. They're buying the land and they plant trees. These youth people, inspired by Muslim teaching, I don't know if it is implemented in Malaysia or not, but it is an innovation for good. However, wakaf is for everyone. There are no faith there. They are for animal. They wakaf for bird, wakaf for ecosystem, for the things that positive. There is potential for that to explore. There's also wakaf for energy. In Istiqlal, I meet the Imam of Istiqlal. He create a platform in internet to raise wakaf energy by system or by application. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. I want to follow up on one or two points there. So I really loved how you spoke about the concept of endowment and waqaf as an operationalizing tool for zakat. Do you feel that with zakat there is, I understand with zakat it's possible to allocate zakat funds towards the prevention of future poverty insofar as it can be used for schools and other things. Do you feel like there's in any way a culture gap, or there is a need for a shift in thinking when it comes to senior ulama level advisory thinking around how to utilize zakat funds?
This is very important question. That is why in talking about religions, we should hear about the who will be the authorities for that teaching. So the role of ulama is very important. We have several fatwas regarding which is outsiding of the, because some orientation of the teaching was, not updated to the current situation. So we have a fatwa regarding using the zakat, infak, and sadaqah for sanitation. So it could be also for the climate change, because and as well as SDGs, because they are for poor, they are for education. So the 17 SDGs could be funded for zakat, from zakat and infak. But however, we need the ulama to state that, either in one country or the Islamic world.
Well, thank you. That's a very transformative concept. I'm going to just hand this over. So moving further down, I'd like to bring in the the next person down, that will be yourself, I believe the Minister for Botswana, the Honorary Fielder Nani Karing. As a policymaker, as a minister, do you feel like there is sufficient appreciation of the value of religious philanthropy when it comes to climate funding and policy?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. May I start just by congratulating us for the first ever pavilion at the COP as we expand the mandate and the discourse and the dialogues to reach everybody and leave no one behind. The religious communities are very critical in national development. In Botswana, I'm the Minister of Environment and Tourism, in short. I think that one has not been updated somewhere, maybe we picked it. Responsible for the policies related to environment and coordinating the government structure of 7 or so other ministries, energy, education, agriculture, that have to do with the environment, and they've all been here because we need to integrate. So first of all, before I answer whether I think it's sufficient, in my country, when we develop policies like we have the climate change policy, the waste management policy, energy policy, the consultative framework always ensures that civil society, including religious bodies, are consulted. And then when we do financing, especially when there's programs for relief, for drought, for emergency funding, we also consider that. But generally, and the reason why I think here you are going to be able to get guidance in terms of those who are ahead of us on engaging the religious family much more comprehensively, I've come for that, because I feel that apart from consultations, also, even with COVID, we had a whole religious body, considered, for delivery of budgets, to help the people in the communities. But you don't have a comprehensive structure and a framework for that. And also, going down from policy to policy implementation, where we now can target specific projects that the religious bodies can implement. That's where we don't have, that framework. So we find that, like what I'm supporting now, I get invited to different activities, conferences, and I speak about climate change, but you don't have a framework. So one of the things that I'm going to request is that, can we organize a guiding framework for countries, for governments to be able to meaningfully involve these? Because you find that, like in my country, some are doing waste management, some are doing, energy-related projects, education. The bodies, have institutions, they have schools, they have clinics and so forth. So they also help a lot in terms of relief, but no structure and a framework. So I can't say it's sufficient. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I think those are some really valuable points about the role of faith communities in terms of outreach, communication. So really valuable points. I'd like to move the conversation on to Chief Dr. Dolewaru. And as the chairman of the African Union's Commission on Interfaith Dialogue, then what potential do you see in interfaith collaboration in Africa generally when it comes to this issue, the issue of resources, the issue of climate funding, resource allocation?
Thank you very much. I bring you greetings from the Interfaith Dialogue of African Union, and we are grateful to you. When we had our election, you were there to support us and gave us a lot of issues. Now, funding and looking at how faith-based organization can mobilize resources is something that is possible and feasible. First and foremost, if you look at faith-based organizations, they are accessible everywhere. Every hamlet, every village, you can get them. Another significant point is that the structures are already there. So it's affordable. One doesn't need to invest a lot of money to be able to get funding to finance climate. Significantly, the agency to which people will contribute towards climate change, if it comes from faith-based organization, is that speed. It is also will be a form of affirmative hope that when you contribute towards the environment, you are contributing for your own stewardship. And this we can find in chapter 2, verse 205 of the Holy Quran, talks about stewardship of the earth. So once we get this, it is easy to get people to contribute more towards climate and climate resilience.
Thank you. Some really valuable points there. I particularly like the point about stewardship, and this is something we've come across before, how religious philanthropy doesn't get hindered by the same psychological constraints as other forms of giving, where one might ask themselves, will my dollar make any difference? Whereas when you're giving towards religious philanthropy, it's more a relationship between yourself and God. It's a personal responsibility. So I thought that was really useful to touch on that. I also wanted to follow up on another point with yourself, given your background as a traditional indigenous leader. Do you feel that there are models of resource allocation, sharing, community organizing relevant to this discussion from the indigenous perspective that could be scaled, that you feel is a useful model?
Thank you very much. Where I come from, Ghana, and the traditional leaders and indigenous people are the custodians of land. So we can get support from land where we can use it meaningfully. Again, once traditional leaders makes the indigenous to feel that they are part of the ownership of land, because they are actually owning it, holding it in trust for the people. Once they feel that, look, this land is for all of us, managing and utilizing the land will be in the interest of everybody. And such land could be made available to ensure that they are used well. Secondly, if you come to look at the issue of mobilizing labor, traditional leaders every Monday and Fridays, they are able to meet their own people, and they're able to share ideas in terms of what affects them on daily life. It is an opportunity for them to be able to raise money to deal with it. Let me make a very good example. A recent program that we launched on religious policy, supported by UNFPA in Ghana, and then technical support from University of Ghana. Indeed, we recognize that in Ghana, out of approximately 32 million Ghanaians, only 400,000 are deemed not to have faith. So approximately almost 31.6 people would believe in faith. Therefore, assuming they are contributing $1 towards climate change, it means that on every Sunday or on every Monday, you are able to raise over 31 million Ghana cedis, or 31 million US dollars, which means that it's significant towards environment and nature conservation. So I think that this is the way traditional rulers can play their role, by making sure that we are able to make lands available for judicious use and to be able to protect the environment, and also meeting our own people to also contribute meaningfully towards it. It doesn't matter the amount of money, but once we all contribute, we know that we are doing it towards a future.
Thank you, Chief Dr. Doliwaru. Maha, I'd like to focus on Islamic finance with yourself, and this will be a theme that I think will stretch across a couple of other panelists as well. But given your background, how do you feel that Islamic finance can be innovatively adapted to meet the needs of climate resilience and sustainability?
Thanks, Shiraz. I think that's a very relevant question, and I've actually attended a couple of panels on this over the course of the week. So everyone's really thinking about how you can effectively mobilize Islamic finance for climate change. Dr. Fakhruddin mentioned several different financial instruments that fall under the Islamic categories of investment, as well as, of course, direct charity in the form of zakat. So I think it's really important that you are able to match specific Islamic finance instruments with the correct investments. I think that's really important. One of the instruments that he talked about was the sukuk. It's a green bond. It's an ESG bond, which meets all of the social and environmental criteria for investment. So essentially, it's an Islamic ESG bond. What's different is that any sukuk instrument needs to be backed by a physical asset. So it has to be either a building or a physical asset that people can invest in over time. So it's a form of patient capital. You're not expecting immediate returns. It's a long-term investment. And I think it can be a very good match for some of the funding requirements for climate resilience infrastructure, investments in renewable energy, investments in energy efficiency, better roads, better infrastructure. It's a great match for that. So I think we need to think about how best to match our investment instrument with the correct investment in climate resilience, for example. We talked about zakat. I think there's a huge potential there, around $1 trillion annually. So I used to previously work with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in Pakistan, and I think one thing we really need to do is institutionalize zakat better. A lot of it is done informally, especially in countries like Pakistan. You tend to give to those closest to you in an informal way. Generally, it's a short-term benefit. It's very reactive. Someone needs to pay for some health issue, or you're trying to feed the hungry, feed the poor. It's very reactive right now in the way it's been deployed, especially in Pakistan. So if it can be institutionalized and diverted towards a proactive approach, so investing in prevention, in resilience and adaptation ahead of climate disasters. I think Muslims are great at reacting to events like disastrous floods, rehabilitation, post-disaster recovery, and the same happens in other disasters as well. So they're very quick to mobilize. The structures are in place. They're able to raise a lot of funding very, very quickly. But I think the efforts need to shift from being reactive to climate disasters to being more proactive, assessing how this fund can be deployed effectively to prevent the destruction from climate disasters, like, for example, floods. When you think about the Waqf instrument as well, I think that's a great example. So zakat, of course, it's a grant, so you're not expecting a return on investment. It can be given as grants also. So I think, again, matching your instrument to the impact, that's really, really important. Waqf is a form of endowment. There's something called sadqa jariya in Islam, which is essentially an investment that you do in your lifetime that continues to benefit the donor even after he or she has passed away. A very popular way to do this in Pakistan is to plant a tree, because even when you've passed away, the tree continues to provide shade, fruit, environmental and health benefits, a home for birds. So these are all things that continue to benefit the giver even after he or she have passed away, as well as, of course, other people around them. So I think this concept could be matched with what we're trying to do in terms of forest conservation, generating carbon credits. I think it's just a really great match, and it makes a lot of sense from the perspective of the donor as well. And I think we could potentially mobilize a lot of finance that way. Currently, there are investments in things like providing clean water through Sadqa Jariya. So when you invest in a well or some kind of a water purifying infrastructure, it continues to purify water and help people even after the initial donor has passed away. So I think these are just some of the examples that I can think of right now, but there are several others. So I just want to leave you with the message that we can really institutionalize philanthropic giving to have a much bigger impact and a much more structured impact with long-term benefits for society.
Well, thank you. Sure. Fine. Now, I'm going to come back and do a little follow-up. Actually, I wanted to bring it back to Minister Nick Nazmi for just a moment, just to touch on that topic. Given your experience as a minister, you sort of stand at this intersection between, I guess, economic policy, traditional policy, and faith. And the examples that you've given to do with Islamic bonds, sukuk, etc., the waqfs, in Malaysia, what scope do you see for that to be scaled up? What potential do you find in that model more broadly?
Yeah, I think like I mentioned just now, we've done things like the wakaf on water, for example, in Malaysia. We've just recently launched the sukuk on biodiversity, but there's still a lot of room. And I think, as I mentioned, I think when we talk, for example, about Islamic finance, there tends to be a lot of focus on the sort of broad definitions of halal and haram, as opposed to the higher objectives or the maqasid sharia. And I think those are the things that we are trying to pursue and trying to get Islamic finance, for example, in Malaysia, to be more open to those ideas and to interact more with SDG concepts. It's happening, but I think it can be happening in a bigger way in Malaysia.
Thank you. I'd like to take the conversation to Dr. Chris Alisaria now from the World Evangelical Alliance. And this is quite an interesting one for me. So I'd like to focus on an initiative that I know Dr. Chris is focused on, Faith for Cities. It'd be great if you can elaborate on this a little bit, because from what I've seen, this is an initiative that sort of steps beyond just philanthropy and focuses on taking faith-based philanthropy a step further and really finding ways to make that effort congruent with faith values. So would love for you to explain that a little bit more. Thank you.
I'd love to explain a little bit more, but I first want to say thanks for allowing me to be here and to support a forthcoming report by Faith for Our Planet that's focused on religious philanthropy. And it's going to come out soon. I've read it, the first draft, and it's really great. And in support of that, I want to talk about faith philanthropy that's opening up new spaces, right? And this is a new space of cities. Cities are a unit of action. As we know, over the last several decade or so, to get things moving, cities have actually led when national governments and other entities have not been able to move. So cities are a place that we can act as faiths to do work. And this is an initiative that's been funded by the Templeton Religion Trust. One of the things that religious philanthropy can do is innovate. We have not been thinking about cities as a unit of action for faith, multi-faith groups in the past, and so now they're innovating with this early phase action by supporting this initiative. So they're investing in this space. And what they're doing is they're opening it up as a commons so that they're saying it's important. And in the early phase, they're scoping out what the commons is for all of us to act together. And they're investing in it to make sure that when all the actors come in, they're coming into a space that they can act optimally, right, with the piece that they have. And it may be a piece that my friend, for example, Cameron from Bahu Trust is working in safe city space, right? So he can bring the safe city space to that. I'm working with other pieces of actors that are working in funding housing, right? And the Housing Act. So all the different actors that make a place and a city better from a faith perspective. The philanthropy is making sure that the commons is going to be working well, it's going to be nurtured, and everyone can act optimally. That's what the early stage of this is. And so our Faith for Cities initiative, look at it online. We're just ramping that up. But that's really, I can talk a lot of things that faith can, religious philanthropy can do. But that's one of the two things. Innovation, cultivating a space for us all to work, and doing collaboration. Of religious philanthropy like the Templeton Trust can help us work together. The last thing I'm going to say, the ultimate goal of Faith for Cities is that we do faith-consistent urban development. That's it, faith-consistent urban development. So that will require probably blended finance, where we can bring faith philanthropy in and blend it with other capital in a capital stack to get better neighborhoods, healthier neighborhoods, street trees, transportation that's working, and so on and so forth. So the last thing I just said, from my religious tradition, which is Christian, you know, we have a vision of the garden, and where we end up in the story is not back in the garden. We actually end up in a city, but it's a special kind of city. It's a city that's a green city. There's a tree in that city, and the leaves of the tree are for healing, and there's a river flowing that. So the way we are going to invest in our future through faith-based, consistent investment in cities is kind of making this green, livable, maybe you can say 15-minute city where we can have a life that is thriving through the design and the investment we put in cities. So I'm just going to end with that. Thank you.
No, thank you. I think this is a fascinating initiative, and really takes the idea of philanthropy beyond just the financial, the narrow financial constraints of giving, but actually creating a reality that is congruent with faith. So that intersection between religious philanthropy and urban sustainability, I think, is very fascinating. Now, I know we don't have much time, and I have lots of questions, so I think we're going to have to wrap up here with just some final remarks from each speaker. And I think we'll have to keep it short, but the question really is a key takeaway for faith communities and leaders in terms of tangible contributions towards climate financing.
Okay, start. Okay, well, since we're almost at time, I'll just quickly sum up. So I think, religion is a very unifying factor, especially for climate action, because I don't think there's any religion in the world that actively promotes the destruction of the environment as a value. So it's something, I think, that is central to all religions, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism. All the major religions really, I think, promote looking after nature, living life responsibly. So together, I think there's a huge opportunity to generate a lot of climate finance. Currently, they manage at least 10% of global investments. So collectively, I think there's a huge impact to be made. Just going forward, I think that's the message I would like to leave with.
Thank you.
Thank
you. All right. On behalf of African Union Interfaith Dialogue, our last steering committee, the theme was Faith in Harvest, Climate Resilience. I would like to conclude by looking at what Islam takes into consideration when it comes to climate. Islam encourages responsive and sustainable environmental behavior. And this you can find if you look at chapter 7, verse 31, that talks about how we can balance the use of resources. If you come and again and look at chapter 36, verse 12, that talks about accountability of our action. Clearly demonstrate that whatever we do on this earth, there will be a day of reckoning. So it is important that we make significant contribution towards climate change and climate financing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll try to be quick. I missed my moment earlier. I think we all agree that religious bodies is a family that cannot be compared to any other in terms of delivering programs on the ground. They are unifying, they are pullers. More than 80% of people in the world, they have a particular faith they are attached themselves to. They have proven their integrity, their responsibility as good stewards of the creation that God has given us. Psalm 24 verse 1 in the Christian Bible, it talks about the world created by God belonging to Him. We are all responsible for ensuring that it's intact and it can benefit future generations. We also appreciate that religious bodies own large assets around. They've got schools, infrastructure, money and everything. But what I want to say is that as we leave the COP, we must have a framework, like I said earlier, that can guide governments to provide a better environment for the religious bodies. We also need to direct financing to specific projects that can help, us to advance this. We need to also, as religious or faith communities, create opportunities for different kinds of experts that belong to a certain church or a certain, organization. Even retired experts, we can actually, be active. I want to conclude by also saying our education and training must target climate change. We must have curricula that help us. Let's document those who are doing good projects and share them in the next COP or anywhere else through different platforms. But let's also be aware that in financing, we must be careful not to go into grey listing because of this thing called money laundering taken through religious bodies, in the face of contributions. Thank you very much.
It's a short one. I think that when I began, what I mentioned was that there's a tendency to look at climate change purely as a problem of science, as a problem of economics, when actually it's a problem of spirituality. And that is something that we have not addressed. And I think if we go back to that, and like in Malaysia, we have an opportunity that we haven't fully harnessed, being a multi-faith country, to work across the religions, to look at how we can develop a solution to this.
Thank you. And Dr. Fakhruddin, just the final few remarks before we wrap it all up. Thank you.
The last, but not least, I think we are keeping through this planet need al-mizan, the balance. As Quran suggests that wasama wa rafa'aha wa al-mizan. We increase the heaven and we set the mizan, the balance. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to have to wrap it up there. Thank you. Just a quick announcement. Faith for Our Planet has, as Dr. Chris mentioned, released a report in partnership with Duke University on this subject matter. It is one of our flagship campaigns. If anyone wants more information, you can find it on our website or come speak to myself or one of the FFLP team members. Thank you so much. Thank you to the panelists. Okay.